We all want to be liked by others, right? I mean, is there anyone out there who genuinely doesn't want other people to like them? If so, you've got to talk to me and tell me why. Well, actually, you probably don't want to talk to me at all since, anyways. Some of us people pleasers go above and beyond, but still, the majority of us would want everyone else to like us. Now, we know that's not reality, but we'd still appreciate it. However, I think we can all recognize that in today's world and culture, it's getting harder and harder to be yourself, live according to God's will, and also be liked by everyone around us. And that's just the unfortunate reality today. Us followers of Christ are going to be naturally different compared to the culture around us and likely start to conform and change to being more like the world if we're not intentional and different on purpose. Regrettingly, I have an experience where I can relate to this pretty well. It's almost been 10 years now when I moved up here to Newburgh to attend George Fox. I was on the baseball team, and of course, as a freshman, I wanted to fit in. I mean, who wouldn't? Everyone wants to be liked, especially by their own teammates, and even more so by the upperclassmen. Anyways, to make a long story short, I made some pretty poor decisions, all because I wanted to fit in. And that's really just how our world is today. If we're not aware and intentionally being different, then the world is going to remake us into something we don't want to be. Now, this May and June are going through the book of Daniel and looking at someone who is quite literally the epitome of being different on purpose. Let's start at the beginning and look at a perfect example from Daniel chapter 1. Starting in verse 3, it says, "The king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Phew. You want to talk about standing up and being different on purpose? Daniel does that like no other. And mind you, in this day and age, standing up to an order from the king could easily get you killed. However, that didn't stop Daniel then, and it sure didn't stop him later. But one thing that specifically stuck out to me this time was what Daniel was standing up against. It was just the king's food and drinks. Now, some of you might read this story and think, wow, Daniel is risking his life over that? It's just the food, it can't be that deep. Or you're like me and thought, man, the food must have been crazy sinful, or whatever that means. Anyways, I think that those thought processes are honestly legitimate because it is just food. But at the same time, I also think that's the whole point. No matter what was thrown Daniel's way, big or small, important or not, Daniel was going to stand up for what he believed in. Yes, it was about the food, but it was also about the principle. He wasn't going to let the king's culture remake him and change who he was. He was going to be different on purpose. And I mean, this will always apply perfectly to our own lives today. Now, we're probably not going to be forced to eat certain foods yet, but we can't ignore the little things in our lives that we know we shouldn't do just so we can fit in or that other people will like us. If we're not intentional about doing the little things the right way, how are we going to stand up to the big things like, spoiler alert, the lion's den? Some things are going to seem not that deep to you, and you're going to have to make that decision on what you're going to do. But remember, it's about the principle. Daniel and the boys could have just ate the food and kept going. Instead, they knew who they were, stood up for what God wanted, and man, did God bless them all. So going forward, and especially these 2 months as we go through Daniel, resolve ahead of time not to become someone else. In a culture designed to remake you, the most courageous thing you can do is remember who God says you are. You got to be different on purpose.